Hi, I'm Professor Beck Strah.
And I'm Professor Eric Bronson, and you're listening to Prison Breakdown.
2, 3, break!
Hate to spoil his fun, but we're gonna bust out of here.
2, 3, break!
I'm locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
2, 3, break!
I can honestly say I'm a changed man. No danger to society here. God's honest truth.
2, 3, break!
I'm not leaving this cell. I'll get out my way. The right way.
2, 3, break!
Ahoy, dudes! Welcome back to another action-packed episode of Prison Breakdown. My name is Beck Strah. I am a former corrections officer and current assistant professor of criminal justice. Joining me is my co-host, Professor Eric Bronson.
Ahoy.
Hello, Eric.
Ahoy. How are you?
You know, I forgot. Ahoy. I said it wrong. Ahoy.
Ahoy. How are you? Good.
Ahoy.
And
yo, I'm outstanding today. How about you?
Wonderful. Wonderful. And producer Britt, how are you?
Ahoy. I am swell. Thank you.
And how's everything on the
A swell is something that also happens on the sea.
Indeed.
how's things on the West Coast?
It's the best coast, and so things are the best over here right now.
Ooh. I wonder how Beck feels about that, being bi-coastal. Which coast is your favorite?
I swing both ways, as they say. I'm more of an East Coaster, but that's built into my whole.
It's your new DNA.
Everything.
That's your new
I
DNA
just
now.
like the East Coast.
It's your new DNA. I love it.
Yeah, my DNA has adapted to the East Coast.
Nice.
So I have a fondness for my Seattle brothers and sisters and other people. So tell me, Eric, what's going on in the weather today, my friend?
Oh, the weather like yesterday and today, it's the humidity. It's disgusting, right? It reminds me of when I lived down there on the Gulf Coast of Texas, where inanimate objects sweat because it's so humid. It's awful. So
That's pretty cool, though.
yeah, that's all right. So
It
we'll
brings
take
reality
it, right?
to a different level. Yeah.
Yeah. But next week we're supposed to be cool all week long. So, summer's almost over for us here on this horrible East Coast.
I'm cool year round, bro. And
Yeah.
Don't put down our coast. We're in a battle.
I love it. I love it. That other coast that we have, I just don't get it. Why anybody want to live out there?
Yeah, no. Let's just break it off and let it, float off into the Pacific.
It's coming one of these days, right? That quake is supposed to chop off all of those states, including Alaska. Just let them all start floating right to Russia where they belong.
That's fine. We can have Alaska back. That's totally fine. But like California makes like all of the money in America.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know if you want to lose that.
No, we sure don't. One state that I would like to lose, though, is our topic once again of conversation in the news. So how about a little news hot off the razor wire?
Bring it.
Fresh news, hot off the razor wire.
All right, a little update from us from that horrible place called Missouri, which, as you remember, during our last podcast, I talked about an individual named Christopher Dunn, who was being held even though evidence showed that he did not commit the crime of murder. So last time we spoke, he was being held when the Attorney General of the state of Missouri refused to release him. So a quick little update. Missouri man Christopher Dunn was freed from prison Tuesday after his murder conviction was overturned after 34 years behind bars, despite the state attorney general's efforts to keep him in there. Dunn, 52, reunited. Yeah, exactly. Dunn reunited with his wife, Kira Dunn, as he was officially released from the St. Louis City Jail Tuesday night. As his release drew imminent, he was driven by van from the state prison in Licking, Missouri to St. Louis. A St. Louis Circuit Court judge overturned Dunn's murder conviction on July 22nd and ordered his immediate release, but Dunn remained in prison amid a chaotic process that began when Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, who had just, it appeared from everything I'm reading about this situation in Missouri, this Andrew Bailey was what's wrong with the criminal justice system. But Andrew Bailey appealed to try and keep Dunn locked up. When asked about the delay since the judge's ruling, Dunn said it was testing to hear the decision by the judge and then be prepared to leave on Wednesday, which was from the previous week, last week, only to be brought back to prison was torture. So that happened last Tuesday. So he spent a full week locked up after the judge said he's to be released. So what happened was that the state attorney general was trying to keep him in. So many political scientists and some attorneys have said Bailey was taking the tough stance to shore up votes in advance of a contested Republican primary. He faces a challenge from another attorney who was a former attorney for President Donald Trump. All right. And what's interesting is that that this attorney general named Bailey is doing similar stuff to other individuals. So another hearing is approaching for an individual named Marcellus Williams, who narrowly escaped lethal injection, is now facing another execution date. St. Louis County prosecutors believe DNA evidence shows that Williams didn't commit the crime that landed him on death row. DNA evidence of someone else, but not Williams, was found on the knife used in the 1998 killing that he was convicted for. Here's my big question, and this idea of justice that we have, the scales of justice, Lady Justice, right?
Lady Justice.
People in the criminal justice system should be concerned with finding the right person to punish, not just a person to punish. I have a friend that was a sheriff down in Texas who later started doing digital forensics investigations. And because it was such a big need, he ended up leaving the sheriff's office and being contracted out through several departments in Southeast Texas. Well, one of the cases that he started working on was a case where an individual who's actually a juvenile was accused of raping another juvenile, the high school students, and the police arrested him. He was held because his parents didn't have any money. He was held in juvenile detention, obviously a serious case. My friend did the investigation. He was able to find that the female in this case actually made this all up. By going into her phone, she could see where she was threatening him with this and let him know what she was planning on doing. What's interesting is when in discussions with him, all of the friends that he lost in the police department in the sheriff's office who no longer wanted to talk to him because he found this. And they're like, oh, we got this guy. And he said, he's not the right guy. He didn't do this. We need to seek out justice. And that's clearly what's going on here with this attorney general named Bailey. He just wants somebody. He doesn't want the right person. He just wants to punish someone. Yeah. There's something very wrong with individuals. I think that when we're looking at people getting hired into the criminal justice system, part of that whole psych exam of police officers, whatever, is trying to find out what does it mean when we're looking at this word justice, and what is, what's really at stake here, because, we got people who are being falsely imprisoned, and then people who are fighting to keep them there. There's something very wrong with individuals who are in that situation, and who are keeping people locked up, punishing people when they haven't done anything.
Right. And that psyche eval, maybe we should be looking for more critical thinkers who are actually trying to further justice rather than let's lock up somebody just
Right.
so we can say we got the right guy, just so we can up our clearance rate, just so we can look better on paper as a police department. That's not what justice is about, guys. And
Right.
if I might digress for just a moment, Jesus Christ, how small of a person do you have to be willing to put someone to death or keep someone locked up in prison indefinitely for political capital?
Right.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
It
is.
I'm just incensed with this. It's absolutely gross. It is these shitty law and order candidates. Oh, let's get tough on crime. Let's lock them up. As we know, and we've probably talked about before on this podcast, people don't lose elections by being tough on crime. And that is the sad, shitty reality of it. Instead, we should be looking at what are people doing to further justice? One thing that the district attorney in Boston, in Suffolk County, was doing for a while was Rachel Rollins. She was, hey, I don't want to focus on drug cases so much. Great. Let's focus on other cases that actually matter. That's in the furtherance of justice.
Right.
Unless it is some serious trafficking issue, we have other shit to do. We have bigger fish to fry. Let's actually focus on actual crime, and when it's drugs, maybe we kick them over to some kind of rehabilitative services. But it's not justice to lock up somebody who is addicted to drugs for possession of like a small amount. It just doesn't make sense on that end, and it's seeing the bigger picture. But
Right.
This guy, what's his name? Bailey in Missouri. He's taking this to the next level of just like being a real shithead. And
Yeah.
I don't believe in any kind of karmic system out there, but I have to hope somehow it swings back to him eventually.
Yep. Yeah. And with us joking about, West Coast, East Coast, all that fun stuff, Missouri really is not a great state to live in. It doesn't have, if we look at this high crime, poor education, lots of people looking for good work. They have low standards of pay. It's just not a great place. And then you got folks like this who are trying to gain the political capital by punishing people who didn't do anything. It's just, not going to rush on over to Missouri to try and find a job or a place to live. It's, we don't want to bash certain but for the folks of Missouri to put up with this. And I'm sure, there are people out there like, hell yeah, we love it. Keep them locked up. Wait a second. This person had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, like we can argue East Coast versus West Coast, but at the end of the day, we can all shake hands and just be glad we're not in Missouri. So sorry, Missouri. And for our Missourian listeners,
no, we're not sorry. We're not sorry. Your state sucks. So don't stand for it.
Do
fight
better.
the man. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So that's the news hot off the razor wire.
Get better elected officials.
Yeah.
All right, now I'm steamed going into
Yes,
our main
exactly.
topic of the day.
Let's get to it.
As our listeners may know, if they listen to our prior episode, we are hot in the middle of Alcatrazgust, which is August with Alcatraz. Yes. What do you know about Alcatraz? What can you tell me about the origins of Alcatraz, you two?
It's a tiny little island out there in the San Francisco Bay. I know
That's our
that.
guy.
And
He's a
it
cute little
has one
guy.
of the most it has one of the most famous lighthouses in the world. So I would
lighthouse
say,
man over here.
yeah, absolutely. What could be better for us, for the two of us? So I think if our significant others are looking for nice photos for us to put in our office, our home office, we're looking for, having that photo of the lighthouse right there on Alcatraz Island, by the sea, that'd be a great picture. But to be serious, I know a little bit about this place. In the early 1930s, the federal government commissioned the military fortification to be turned into a federal prison, which is Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary.
Yeah,
am I
that is
anywhere
true.
close?
Let me get to that.
Yes,
You are
let's do
very
it.
close, my friend. Also, like when we retire, the two of us, let's become lighthouse keepers, like those guys in that movie, The Lighthouse. They look like they were having a good time.
Absolutely, they were.
That'll be us.
Yes.
Now, Alcatraz Island, as Eric mentioned, it is 1.25 miles offshore from the city of San Francisco. The name Alcatraz itself is derived from the Spanish La Isla de los Alcatraces, which means island of the gannets. Gannets being a type of seabird that's found on islands and coasts. So it's an island of seabirds. The exact meaning is still subject to some debate, but it's like island of the birds or island of the pelicans, like that kind of thing. It was first discovered in 1775 by Spanish explorer Juan Manuel de Ayala. He sailed into San Francisco, mapped out the 3 islands, named one of these islands Alcatraces, which later got anglicized into Alcatraz. Mexico had custody of the island after its War of Independence against Spain in 1821, and we had the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, where it got passed from Mexico to the U.S. And this brings us up to 1850. In 1850, quick, who is our president?
Oh, hell.
It was the last president who is neither a Republican or Democrat.
Duh.
That's right. It's our buddy, Millard Fillmore, who I always think about in terms of, there was a cartoon, a comic strip, Mallard Fillmore, where there was like a duck. Was the duck the president? Producer Britt, can you comment on Mallard Fillmore?
Yes, he was a duck. You're correct.
And the duck was the president? That's the whole joke?
No, the duck wasn't the president, I don't believe.
He was a buffoon?
He had something political. Yeah. He was doing something political. It was basically like a Veep in comic form starring a duck, if I recall correctly.
Oh, that sounds great. I'd read that. Now, Mallard Fillmore signed a presidential order to set aside Alcatraz as a U.S. military installation. Mallard Fillmore.
Oh, okay.
So at the time he sets this aside as a military installation, we have the California gold rush going on. San Francisco is booming, and there's this perceived necessity that we had to defend the Bay Area in case invaders came through. So the U.S. Army goes out there and they build a fortress on Alcatraz Island in the 1850s, and they installed all these cannons, and it became actually our most defended area on all of the West Coast. Over time, though, there was this realization, maybe Alcatraz isn't that necessary for defense. None of the cannons ever got fired. They were purely ornamental for the entirety of the time they've been out there. And around that time, they also built a lighthouse, which is Eric's stop.
Yes.
And that was actually our first operational lighthouse on the west coast of the United States. Bet you didn't know that, did you?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Which is amazing because
that
that Pacific coast is really jagged and vicious, going up and down, from Mexico up through your old stomping grounds in Alaska. That's some rough coastline there. Lots of rocks and mountains, and you don't have a whole bunch of beaches that you can run your boat up on. You're slamming into some rocks there.
Yeah, you would think that somebody would have come up with a lighthouse up there somewhere beforehand, but no dice. So Mallard Fillmore, as we will call him henceforth,
hey, let me ask you something.
Military installation.
Let me ask you something about Fillmore. Right?
Yeah.
Back in 1850. Do you see the picture of him?
No, I have not. Describe him to the audience.
Oh, you need to look him up. He is clearly Alec Baldwin is a descendant of Fillmore.
Wow, I just looked him up, and he is a ringer for Alec Baldwin. That is
holy
crazy.
Shit. I mean, that is, unless it's a fake picture, that is, I mean, it looks like Alec Baldwin posed for that photo.
and Mallard Fillmore kind of looks like Howard the Duck.
Oh, there we go.
It's been around since 1994, and it lasted until 2020. Rest in peace, Mallard Fillmore.
Got COVID, huh?
Too political.
Well, he didn't get the vaccine, dumbass.
So going back to our beloved President Fillmore of the Whig Party, which I actually don't want to back that up. I don't know if he's beloved. I don't know anything about him. But by the late 1850s, he'd built that military fortress, and we start having military prisoners that are held on the island. They were holding Confederate sympathizers, and they were holding private citizens who were accused of treason. And so that happened throughout the Civil War. And after the Civil War, this prison becomes a prison for Native Americans. In 1909, the Army demolished this fortress. They left the basement, though. And the basement ended up being a foundation for a new building. And they made the military prisoners that they still had in custody build a new prison on top. So the prisoners had to build their own prison. The old prison, that fortress I was talking about, it was wooden construction. What's the problem with making a wooden prison?
I don't know. Maybe you can saw through stuff, or you can burn it down.
Yeah. It's like having a wooden car. Like there's reasons we don't have those.
Yeah.
So they realize maybe it's too vulnerable for fire out here, and there's not resources like a fire department on this island. So the new prison gets rebuilt entirely with concrete, and the prison is used as the disciplinary barracks for the U.S. Army Pacific Branch, and they start calling it The Rock. Yes, that's right, you guys. The Rock, like the name of that cool Nicolas Cage, Sean Connery movie that took place out there. The Rock.
Nice.
Now, the Army ended up using the island until 1933. And in 1933, the Department of Justice took it over. And the facility that was built by military prisoners, the new concrete facility, it becomes the Alcatraz prison that we know and love, and a major site for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And at this time, it becomes a maximum security prison for the most notorious inmates in federal prisons. And one that will show the general public, hey, we can be serious about crime because we're going to put inmates out here in the middle of nowhere. We're going to put them on this island. It's escape proof, as far as we can tell. And
yes,
it's going to hold these guys. It's going to hold the worst of the worst, as they say.
Yes.
Now, in 1934, the prison itself gets modernized. It gets fortified. Now it's this prison made to hold even the most wily of inmates. They're going to spend their time in these 9 by 5 foot cells with very few privileges. And the inmates in federal custody who would be most likely to escape, guess what? They're going here. And in 1934, we get our first batch of inmates. We get 14 inmates from McNeil Island in Washington State, and we get 32 military personnel who were convicted of crimes. And the new prison had a capacity of 336 people.
Which is tiny.
So it was it's so small. It's like for as well known as the prison was,
right.
It didn't have a huge capacity. It just had the most notorious people who just received the most publicity for their crimes in the United States. It doesn't even necessarily mean that they were the most heinous or worst crimes. It's just the most publicized bad guys.
Right. Well, it's interesting.
The boogeymen.
Yeah, exactly. So you have the most notorious individuals in the federal prison system that get sent there to go to what ended up being the most notorious prison, whether it was deserved or not, because this place was not big. It was, when we're talking about size of prisons, that is a tiny, tiny prison. If if you got less than 400 beds, that's little. Yeah, right.
That is like, there's plenty of jail. The jail I worked at for 2.5 years as a corrections officer, we had a capacity of slightly over 1,000, and it was for a county. So you would think you're going to make this prison 336. That's it.
Right.
It's not a lot of space on Alcatraz Island, but
Yeah,
they're using it.
exactly.
So even though Alcatraz was always a well-known prison, it never actually held more than 1% of the Bureau of Prisons population. The living conditions there required single celling, which just means one person to each cell, which inmates themselves often like. That means that you don't have somebody up in your face all the time. You don't have to deal with somebody's bad breath. You can use the bathroom with relative privacy, even though you can see the guy across the row from you using it through the bars. It's at least relative privacy compared to sharing a bunk and sharing this small room with someone. So other than that relative privacy, there's a lot to not like. There's a monotonous daily routine. The inmates really just given their rights: food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. And there were some privileges that they could earn. Like they had some jobs, some visits from family, some writing correspondence with family. They had a library with access. They had painting, listening to music. And for a period, there was even a band. But when the authorities actually saw that people would comply or play along with the system, those inmates would get shipped out to another federal prison, because Alcatraz was this prison of last resort. They don't want the regular inmates. They just want people who are making headlines. They want people who are trying to escape. They want, as they say, the worst of the worst. And we know Alcatraz for some big names, which I'll get to later. But primarily, it was a place where the Bureau of Prisons sent their problem kids, the ne'er-do-wells, the riffraff who made trouble in the other prisons, the people who were considered violent, dangerous, or at high risk of escaping.
The ne'er-do-wells. I always loved that.
Started in 1934.
The ne'er-do-wells. That's a fun word, ne'er-do-well.
I like that too. What's your go-to word for that? Like I always like riffraff.
Riffraff, hooligans. Hooligans is always a good one.
Ooh.
Yeah,
I like hooligans too. Producer Britt.
Hooligans up to their tomfoolery.
The chicanery.
I like ne'er-do-well. Ne'er-do-wells is my favorite, probably. Oh, scofflaws.
Oh,
scofflaw.
yes. Yep. I'm into it. Scofflaw. I'm going to integrate scofflaw into my vocab now.
We got to start using that in class.
Yes. So we see an end to prison operations after less than 30 years. Alcatraz, for as notorious as it was, it didn't last that long. On March 21st, 1963, we see an end to prison operations. The prison is too expensive.
All flash and no substance.
Yeah, right? Like it is an island that is trying to be run by a handful of people, and it's just not that cost effective. In 1959, the Bureau of Prisons drops this report, and it shows the public that Alcatraz costs 3 times more than other prisons to run, and with way fewer inmates. It just doesn't make that much sense from a cost analysis perspective, especially when taxpayers are footing the bill. So it's not that popular for that.
And that's one of the things that I think is most important, that, the whole popular culture lure of Alcatraz is that when we had the escapees and that were never found, right? That's why they shut it down. When these 3 guys escaped, that has nothing to do with it shutting down. It shut down because of money, period. If they could have found a way to run this for cheaper than what it costs to run other federal prisons, it'd still be open today. It has nothing to do with the escapes, because we have people escaping from prisons all over the place, and they stay open.
If we look in 1963 dollars, it costs $10 per inmate per day, where anywhere else in the country you're paying $3 per inmate per day. It's not even really a question of, do we keep this running, because there's alternatives. There's other places we can find. The problem is, as I mentioned, it's in the middle of an island. There's a lot of operational and maintenance costs to deal with out there, as you would with any prison, but out there especially, there's constant exposure to salt water that is breaking down the prison. It is eroding the prison. Engineers ran an analysis, and they said, you guys, it looks like it's going to be $5 million to fix all the problems and repair all the damage done. So we're just going to kiss this sweet facility goodbye. So
and
we shut
that's,
the
if
doors
you
on
think about
Alcatraz as a prison.
$5 million back in the 60s, that's a lot of money. And, we're going back a long time. That's a lot of money in terms of what it is today. So for them to be able to fix it and then to understand that because it is, driven by the elements, it's going to be a constant upkeep and it's not going to get any cheaper.
You want to hear something crazy? So looking at a calculator, what it's worth due to inflation, $5 million in 1963 is roughly $50 million today.
Nice.
Yeah. So there's not much that we can do to save this guy. And so that's even just one estimate. I'm sure there's others, but we'll still agree that it's a lot of money. Now, Alcatraz post-prison, it gets reshuffled back into the United States real estate portfolio. It's still owned as federal land, but it gets classified as excess federal property. And in 1964, we had 5 indigenous persons of the Sioux tribe file a claim for Alcatraz. They said, this is native land, we want this. And they wanted to turn the prison structure into a university for Native American studies and host a museum there. That's a cool idea. But the United States was not having it.
No.
And instead, they allowed the Department of the Interior to do a study on the site. They said, maybe it's feasible as a federal recreation area. And the Native Americans said, what are you doing? We asked for this place for our own purposes. They're not having it. And in 1969, we get this group of around 200 Native Americans that go out to Alcatraz Island for a peaceful protest. It was mostly college students who wanted to claim the land after their university idea got shot down by the government. And they're out there for a while. And there's a number of unfortunate events that happened in late 1969 around the protest, including there was the death of a young woman who was the group leader's daughter. She was 13 years old. There was an accidental fire that destroyed a number of historic buildings on the island, including the Coast Guard quarters, the lighthouse keeper's home, and the warden's house. And we start to see these protesters trickle out over time. And a couple of years later, by June 1971, we only had 15 people left standing with the original 200. It's really hard to live on this island for any amount of time. There's just not resources like you have on the mainland that is a mile, slightly over a mile away. And federal agents show up to remove the last people standing. So the Native American protest was gone. And in 1972, President Nixon signed in legislation that transferred the land to the National Park Service, and he allocated $120 million for development of the land. And they could have just spent the $5 million years before, but instead, Alcatraz Island got transferred to the National Register of Historic Places, and it became a National Historic Landmark in the mid-'80s. Alcatraz Island is currently open for tours, and they get around 1.5 million visitors each year.
And let's not forget that part of their tourism is they have the Alcatraz triathlon, where you swim from you start in Alcatraz Island and you swim across the bay over to San Francisco to start your run or bike ride.
Oh, that sounds crazy. Where do you bike ride to? There's not that many places to go. There's the island they bike. So they swim from the island. They start off at Alcatraz, and then they swim over to mainland, and then bike in San Francisco, and then they finish with their run. It's quite the event. If I was still young and in shape, I would definitely want to do that. But that's a heck of a swim, 1.2, 1.3 mile, and with that current ripping through there too, because that's the other fun thing is, you're getting pushed around out there. That's difficult for an escape, and the people who have tried to escape didn't make it, and some were never seen or heard from again, and we can assume that they probably died trying to cross the bay.
Yeah,
doesn't work out well for people. Also, did you ever watch that Jack LaLanne video of Jack LaLanne. There was a fitness guru in 1974 who like dragged a boat from San Francisco to Alcatraz Island, like with a rope between his teeth, and he swam.
No. No.
Yeah, the man was like 60 something years old, 70 something years old. Yeah, he was age 60, and he swam from Alcatraz Island to Fisherman's Wharf while he was handcuffed. That's crazy.
Really?
The handcuffed part is really remarkably weird.
Yeah. That is remarkable. All while dragging a boat from his mouth?
Oh, yep, that's right. Yep. Okay, yeah. Maybe edit out that part where I was checking, but yeah, he dragged a boat while handcuffed, and dragged it with his teeth. I bet your mouth hurts after that.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah. Why would you want to do that? I get the publicity stunt, but like, you don't have to drag a boat and be handcuffed. You can choose one or the other.
Yeah, and you're doing that in salt water too. Come on. That's anyway.
With quite a current. Yeah, this guy's he's got it.
Now, have both of you been there?
Yeah, twice.
Yeah. I've been twice as well. I might go a third time. I might go again when we're there in November for the American Society of Criminology conference, because I feel like I learn something new every time I go there, or I forget enough. But even researching this episode, I feel like I learned enough to give it new context that would make it interesting again.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the history of Alcatraz. Next time, we will be introducing some of the most notable Alcatraz inmates, telling their stories, and getting into some escape attempts from Alcatraz, of which there were a few, and there were some interesting happenings, including the Battle of Alcatraz, which I'll leave off on and tease it there. Now, speaking of Alcatraz, we have a movie minute concerning the Birdman of Alcatraz, one of our notable inmates there. Shall we kick it over to Movie Minute?
Movie minute. Movie minute. 60 seconds with producer Britt to talk about movies.
Let's put 60 seconds on the clock. So last week, I believe it was Judge Beck sentenced me to watch. Actually, maybe it was myself that sentenced me to watch The Birdman of Alcatraz. So 1962's Birdman of Alcatraz by John Frankenheimer, best known for directing The Manchurian Candidate the same year, is somewhat of a slow burn. At its core, it's about a man who takes care of birds in prison.
Yes.
But it's also very much about a murderer who spent much of his life in solitary confinement for doing a murder in Alaska, by the way. Also about a son missed by his mother, a husband yearned for by his wife, and a prisoner who grows to have respect of his warden. All in all, this was a fine movie, if fairly long. It's over 2 hours and 20 minutes. Maybe only half of the film is dedicated to Robert Stroud, the titular Birdman of Alcatraz, taking care of his birds. One point of contention, however, is he was not the Birdman of Alcatraz. Well, he was. That was his title. He did serve some time in Alcatraz, but the entirety of his bird education and knowledge was developed at Leavenworth Prison in Kansas City. Overall, I liked the film just fine, but it did suffer from classic 60s movie pacing, and it also felt like at times I was watching a book, being that it was, adapted from a book. I'm happy to know more about Robert Stroud and his story, but the title is a bit misleading, and the movie could have been tightened up by a full 45 minutes to an hour. 2.5 suits.
Wow, surprisingly low for a movie that was, I believe, God, what's the lead actor's name? He was nominated for an Academy Award for the role.
What was his name? It was, he was Burt Lancaster. There you go.
What a great name, okay. Burt Lancaster.
It's a very strong, you don't hear names like that anymore.
I just don't meet Burts anymore.
No.
Yeah.
It's more like Birdman of Alcatraz.
Yeah, I deliver mail, and I feel like I haven't seen like any Burts really and I've seen some weird names, but no birds. You don't see many birds anymore.
All right.
Indeed.
Well-
But you would not recommend this one?
Not very highly.
If you're like into old films. If you're into like, old black and white films, this one might be for you. It's not a bad film by any means. It's just a little bit long, feels a little bit slow. I watched this between yesterday and this morning, and so like I was tired both times. So like it had trouble keeping my attention, and that might be on me because I famously just fall asleep during black and white films. Like if you want to put me to sleep within 5 minutes, just put on like M or something like that, and I'm fucking out. So I don't know, good, but not great in my opinion. But I just have certain issues with a lot of 60s films in general.
Honestly, I love seeing a black and white film in a theater. I also have trouble just even getting the impetus to put one on often at home because I think, oh, this is going to be something that just puts me out sooner than I want to be out. And so a theatrical experience is such a good way to experience it where I know I'm going to hold myself to staying awake because I do want to see some of these films.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I mean, they're important films, and this is definitely like an important film based on an important book about a fairly important person, but it just didn't totally capture me.
Let me ask, did you find him a sympathetic character in the film?
Yeah, because he was very sympathetic because after like his initial murder and stuff, he's pretty much on the straight and narrow, really just cares about his birds. It's about a guy who like sinks himself into his passion more than anything, and that's interesting. And all the bird stuff, the bird like half of the film was pretty good. I liked that stuff. Everything surrounding it though was whatever. Him getting transferred and committing the murder, getting married, stuff like that. It was all right.
Yeah, give us a more focused movie that just focuses on him being a Birdman. It's called Birdman of Alcatraz. It's not called like Man Who Gets Transferred to Alcatraz. That's not anything.
Right. Very true.
Did it get into his crimes and the actual crime that was committed that put him in federal prison?
A little bit. The murder in Alaska, yeah, kind of. I mean, that's like kind of how the movie opens and stuff, but it's it doesn't go fully into it. There's not like a big courtroom drama or anything surrounding it. It's mostly just, hey, he did this bad thing. Here's the setup for the movie. Now he's in prison. Here's the birds.
Okay.
Yeah, release the bird cut where it's just the birds.
Yeah,
I believe Alfred Hitchcock already made that film.
Well,
all right. That's all that's fit to discuss today around prisons.
I have your next sentence, and this one looks awful.
What's that?
It's The Haunting of Alcatraz in 2020.
Yes.
Yeah. The Haunting of Alcatraz. Right. From what?
From 2020, you said?
Yes.
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, that's not going to be in black and white.
No, but it's going to be awful.
I bet.
The whole thing makes no sense whatsoever. So we'll see.
Fair. Well, that's Movie Minute.
This has been a Movie Minute. All
Indeed.
right. We would like to thank Roger Williams University School of Justice Studies for being a wonderful sponsor of this here podcast. Eric, what can you tell us about the School of Justice Studies?
Well, the Justice Study has many majors related to criminal justice and the justice field, such as criminal justice, forensic science, legal studies, cybersecurity, and networking, as well as public administration and leadership. So lots of degrees to pick from, both undergraduate and graduate. So if you're looking to advance your education and or give yourself the opportunity to promote faster within criminal justice related field, reach on out. We'll hook you up. We'll get you settled, and maybe you'll be fortunate enough to have Professor Beck Strah as in your class.
Hey, that's me. And I would love to have you in my class. Let me say that, listener. I want you to know I care about you.
Yes, we would love to have you in the class.
Now, shall we shut the doors to Alcatraz until next time?
Yes, sir. Lights out, my friend.
Indeed.
Wait.
Uh-oh.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, please rate, please subscribe, and join us next time for another discussion of Alcatraz and its inmates and future episodes on other prison stuff. Thank you for listening. Eric?
Lights out.
Oh, and actually, we don't have a lights out this time because last podcast, Judge Eric sentenced me to make a song based on a joke that I made. And I made that song because I take jokes way too far.
Yes.
So
love it. Let's do
without
it.
further ado, we'll be closing out with a joke of mine. It goes a little something like this. What does a pirate say to a bag of Lay's? Chips ahoy.
Oh.
Well, a pirate's life is a hungry life, and you're always wanting more. I got no kid and I got no wife to greet me back at shore. So when I land, wages in hand, well, I head down to the store.